CyberSec Asia 2024 Cross Thailand International Cyber Week 2024 powered by NCSAs. Here at CyberSec Asia 2024 and Thailand International Cyber Week 2024, where you can explore together with the key leaders in cybersecurity industry from Thai and across Asia under one roof to foster collaboration, share insight, and shape the future landscape of cybersecurity. Coming up right here at the main stage where you can listen from the expert in cybersecurity industries about the insights, knowledge, and explanations to make the world safer. Don't be hesitant to find your seat and sit back and relax throughout this morning session. And I'd like to encourage you all attendees once again about the Q&A session. The Q&A is open to all of you. If you have any questions in your mind and you'd like to ask or listen to more information from our speakers, feel free to scan the QR code, which is appear on the screen shortly, and access the links. Don't miss to select main stage for the room and the functions, and you can drop your questions ahead. At the end of this session, your question will bring on the stage, and our speakers are happy to answer your questions. So please feel free with this our platform via Slido. Let's start our first program of the day, and I would like to inform all of you that this is a great opportunity to all of you to listen to our first topic of the day by SquareX with the fascinating topics from hacker to entrepreneurs. This session, we are honored to have founders of SquareX joining with us on stage. Please welcome Vivek Ramachandran.
Good morning, everyone. This is the very first talk in the morning, so I appreciate everyone coming in, making the time. Very honored also to open day 2. I'm Vivek Ramachandran, currently the founder of SquareX. Before that, I founded multiple companies which have exited. So this is not a technical talk. It's more about the journey from being a hacker, where I've discovered vulnerabilities, found attacks, and from there, how over the last 22 years, I became a cybersecurity entrepreneur, created product companies and all of that. So of course, 20 years plus is a long time, and it's been a fascinating journey. So when the organizers contacted us, I said, look, I'm probably an ordinary hacker cybersecurity guy, just like many of you, with very interesting things happening along the way, which kind of culminated to me eventually becoming a cybersecurity company founder, entrepreneur. So the idea was to kind of take you through that journey and some interesting things that I've learned, which could be interesting. Again, no two people's lives are the same, so take everything with a pinch of salt, but some interesting experiences to share. So I was born and brought up in India, and I got my first computer, I think, when I was 19, which probably is very, very different from many of you. At that time, a computer to be imported from the US was literally 6 months of my dad's pay. So it was a massive family discussion whether this even makes sense, should a computer be bought. Eventually, my mother somehow managed to convince my dad, and I got a compact Presario. Any of you remember a compact Presario? Okay, a few folks. And at that time, the internet was also not the graphics internet we had access to, but rather the text terminal one. The graphic version was just coming up. I don't know if any of you remember Lynx as a web browser. Yeah. So the non-GUI browsers and whatnot. Anyway, I got the computer, somehow managed to get this extremely expensive internet connection, and then I fell in love even before I went into engineering. So when I was preparing, at that time, these massive DDoS attacks were happening on Yahoo. This is way back in 2000. I don't know if you remember the DDoS attacks which brought down Yahoo, Alta Vista, and all of those sites. And I became very curious. I said, hey, how is it even possible that one single person wrote a tool which brought all of these infrastructures down? So I started researching, and I found out that there was this hacker called Mixter, and he had written this tool called TFN, which was being used by a lot of malicious attackers to do these DDoS attacks. So I started researching, downloaded the tool, opened it up, understood absolutely nothing. You know, it's written in a mix of C and some parts in assembly. So that's really where my journey began, is I started becoming very curious. At that point, you know, most engineering colleges or even most computer colleges weren't really teaching cybersecurity. It was plain old, you know, operating systems and whatnot. So started teaching myself primarily by looking at online zines. I don't know if folks remember e-zines back in the day, code breakers, whatnot. Along with reading code, trying to write my own programs and whatnot. Anyway, moved on, finished my engineering, and then I was lucky enough to get the very first job at Cisco Systems way back again in 2004. And these were the times that you literally couldn't get your hand on networking products. So for me, when I joined Cisco as a programmer, I was primarily tasked with implementing 802.1x port security, layer 2 security. But there was this massive Cisco lab which was available. And over the weekends, I used to go literally unplug other team devices and start teaching myself how to use VPN concentrators, you know, Cisco's 7500 series of routers and whatnot. Incredibly, at that point, you know, it was a pretty open environment where I think I managed to even reach out to people who had designed these systems within Cisco. And they never knew that probably this is a 24-year-old writing to folks who literally designed a large part of the internet. But I got those replies, got really motivated, wrote a bunch of papers, and by then I felt, hey, you know what, I absolutely love this. I would want to go ahead and just do cybersecurity for the rest of my life. I mean, it was love at first sight, but now I decided to get married to it as well. But of course, this was not a time when research or offensive research was even happening anywhere. So when I was a programmer, at that point, some hackers had actually found vulnerabilities in Cisco products, which they had gone ahead and talked about at DEF CON and Black Hat, the two big cybersecurity conferences which happen in Las Vegas every year. So that piqued my interest, and I felt, hey, why not go ahead and see if I can break our own products internally? So I started finding vulnerabilities which wasn't appreciated quite a bit, because this was not a time when you had bug bounty programs and developers got overly excited when you went in and said, hey, you know what, you haven't even handled a simple buffer overflow. So I quickly figured I could not be in a regular development role and learn offensive cybersecurity. So this was the time Microsoft had planned to organize the very first bug bounty program of sorts, where around 65,000 people participated, the Microsoft Security Shootout Contest. This was way back in 2007, again, 16 years. And I participated. I was one of the top 10 winners. And then Microsoft said, hey, would you want to join our consulting in Redmond, where you can help people with cybersecurity? But hey, the whole contest was about just breaking apps. And the breaking part sometimes is a lot more fun if you start enjoying it. So I decided not to go ahead with any of that and said, why not join a company which allows me to just do cybersecurity research and find vulnerabilities? So I was lucky enough to join this startup called Airtight Networks in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. And they were building wireless intrusion detection systems. And they really wanted to go ahead and find vulnerabilities in Wi-Fi protocols and stacks and all of that. So fast forward, I discovered the cafe latte attack, which was the very first way in the world on how you could go ahead and break an encryption key off a wireless network with just a client, even if the client is not connected to the infrastructure network. And from there on, I've discovered multiple vulnerabilities, broken encryption protocols like web cloaking and whatnot. So at that point, I came back, and then Airtight said, look, we've discovered enough attacks. Why don't you go back to product development? But I already tasted blood. There's absolutely no way that I wanted to go back to regular product development. So I told my parents, hey, I'm going to come back and just move into your home again. And to give you context, right, I just 7 years in the industry. My parents have started announcing to all my relatives that Vivek's starting to do well. You know, he's in a good job. And then I walk up to them and say, I'm going to quit all that, move into your mezzanine floor, which is probably, you know, kind of like a basement. And my dad was like, what do you want to do? So I was like, just do security research, see where it goes. So to their credit, as much as they were appalled and surprised and shocked, they said, okay, you know what, try whatever you want. So that was the time when I discovered more and more attacks, went to DEF CON and Black Hat, literally every year started doing main stage talks, got a lot of press coverage, authored a couple of books which are still there on Amazon on wireless security, a couple of other topics. Was very lucky, you know, most of them were bestsellers. And then finally my dad told me, hey, I'm seeing these massive bills on the credit card because of all your travel. And, you know, you really probably need to transition over to start making some money. So then I thought to myself, hey, what can I do? So one of the things which happened is because I was at all of these conferences disclosing these attacks, companies from around the world used to contact me saying, could you come down and just show us how this attack happens? Could you show us how we could defend against similar attacks? So I said, you know what? The exchange rate was working well. And I said, okay, you know what? Why not just travel the world, do trainings, help organizations, come back and still do what I wanted to do, which is find more attacks. So very accidental, right? Both my parents were working in banks. There was absolutely nobody in my family who ever wanted to become an entrepreneur, including myself. I didn't even know that word existed, by the way. So that was the time when I think I probably traveled over 20 to 25 countries in just 1 to 2 years. I've done trainings with Fortune 500 companies, the US Department of Defense, the European Council General, counterintelligence teams, primarily showing them how attackers were breaking into networks. And very quickly, I think the training started getting popular, where there was literally 1 year where I literally never went back home. I was just airport to airport. Gained close to 20 pounds. Eating pretty much, you know, whatever airport food that I could get. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not getting time to go back and do the research I love. So I said, why not just put up my video lectures online and see if people want to buy? Now, everyone thought it was a bad idea. So my parents told me, hey, who would want to get video lectures, you know, from someone in India with an Indian accent? Like, would people even watch that? So then I said, you know what? If out of 100 people, even 5 people like it, I think I can still do what I'm, you know, doing already. So that was my motivation, and I just went on. So I launched securitytube.net, which was a free site where I started putting up my own video lectures. The readership of the site grew to over 100,000, you know, cybersecurity people every month coming, commenting, contacting me. And then I decided to launch Pen Tester Academy. So at that point in time, very few people were looking at how offensive attackers would work. And Pen Tester Academy was all about, hey, let's look at offensive security. Not the company, but offensive security in general. So Pen Tester Academy grew very, very fast. I think we had a subscription service where we started getting thousands of customers around the world. I think over 220 countries in 6 to 7 years that I ran it. I really enjoyed it. Very, very small team. Hired the absolute smartest people that I could find. And even at that scale, the company was only 14 or 15 people, if I remember. So after I ran it for a few years, I started figuring out that I was spending too much time just running things rather than doing what I enjoyed, which is, building attacks, products, and whatnot. So during that time, I also launched wireless monitoring products. So 802.11 AC had just come in, and this was a massive high-speed network which was very difficult to monitor. And all you had was infrastructure devices from very large vendors, and there was literally nothing there to monitor. So the US DoD requested, because I was doing a lot of wireless attacks, and they said, hey, could you build us a monitoring device for 11AC? So spent some time, built the monitoring device, and they became one of the biggest clients for that. And post that, I started feeling like, look, there were larger problems in cybersecurity, consumer security, which I wanted to solve. And I always say this, right? The day you wake up and you don't feel like doing the same thing again, it's probably a good time to change. So I had done cybersecurity education, the monitoring products now for well over a decade. And there was a very large event where we were doing, a massive training for around 300 people. And that day I woke up and I was like, no, I don't want to go to class. I want to do something else. So the company was doing well. We had Fortune 500 customers, as I said, over from 200 countries. The company had grown quite a bit as well. I think at peak, we were around 45 to 50 people, with around 20 in the US and Silicon Valley, some in India, some in Singapore. So that was the time I decided to exit the company. So Pen Tester was acquired by INE, which is actually owned by one of the largest private equity funds in the US in New York. They acquired the company. And then post that, I literally had nothing to do. So I said, hey, how can I be helpful? So Microsoft contacted me and they said, you've done a fair bit. We'd like to recognize you as one of the top experts in the world. And they gave me an honorary title called Regional Director. It's an unpaid honorary title. Allows us to actually meet Microsoft's top brass, including the CEO, once a year, where we can give them feedback about cybersecurity, how Microsoft's doing, and a bunch of other things. So this was actually the time when my children were growing up. And my 10-year-old son came to me and he said, Dad, what do you do? So I said, go Google me. And he came back and said, oh, you're a hacker. You steal from people. So I was like, okay, this is going absolutely wrong. Right? When your elder son comes to you and he feels like you're a thief. So I quickly realized that the mainstream narrative of hacking cybersecurity was unfortunately very negative. And if you just Google these words, more often than not, you only find negative things. My personal definition of hacking was more about curiosity, more about finding the unknown, trying to push the limits of existing systems. Do they break? Could you have them do other things? So then I realized, hey, the best thing to do is challenge myself to be a little creative. So I decided to do a hacker comic book. So all of you in your goodie bags would probably have seen Hackers, Superheroes of the Digital Age. That was actually completely written, conceptualized by me. I can't draw to save my life, so I hired great artists to probably go ahead and do a great job at that. And what I wanted to do is create a comic book which could be given to younger people, people just coming into cybersecurity, giving them an absolute real bird's eye view of how attackers think, how defenders think, the realistic aspect of cybersecurity. Not the one you see in the movie Matrix, right, where Neo waves his hand and the skies part and the networks give way. Instead, what really happens? So we've distributed, I think, over 100,000 copies in all conferences, including DEF CON, a bunch of them. So then I said, hey, what do I do now? What do I do next? So by then I had an amazing team, who was with me in Pentester Academy. And I had also looked at a lot of interesting problems in cybersecurity. And one problem I felt hadn't been solved well was web browsing security. I mean, how many of you still know about victims of online scams, phishing attacks, malicious file downloads and whatnot, right? So I said, okay, why not build a browser-native security product which can actually detect all of this in the last mile when the user is interacting. So that's how SquareX was born. I spent a couple of months with my team sitting, researching, trying to build some interesting proof of concepts. Sequoia Capital, Southeast Asia. People who don't know, Sequoia Capital is one of the most well-known venture capital funds. They came in and they said, hey, we'd love to participate. So Sequoia is one of the investors in SquareX, and that's how everything started. So I think, in conclusion, what I can say is, if there's anyone out there who's in cybersecurity, feels like they want to take a plunge, start a company, do things, I can tell you it isn't as difficult as you think. Cybersecurity, in my mind, will always be evergreen because it's a second-order function. Any new technology can come, there will always be a cybersecurity angle, right? So it will never go out of fashion, it's not a fad, it'll always be around. And hopefully, there were some interesting takeaways from my talk. Running out of time. So in the brief period that we've launched SquareX, we have over 100,000 users in just 4 months who started using the product. We are going to launch an enterprise version as well. A lot of coverage when we launch from Forbes, TechCrunch, all the top publications. We are trying to do something a little disruptive. Take a look. This is the early SquareX team. These are the folks who do all the work. I only get to do the talking now, and some of them are here. So thank you so much.